I'm afraid I must insist you leave, Miss Grimwood. The position has been filled. Tabitha Grimwood stood in the marble entrance hall of Ravenshire Manor, her traveling cloak still damp from the rain, and wondered which of her three elder sisters had sabotaged her this time. The housekeeper's expression suggested she'd been expecting someone quite different, someone who hadn't arrived wearing a gown 2 seasons out of fashion with a conspicuous patch on the sleeve. Filled? Tabitha kept her voice level. I received Lord Ravenshire's letter 3 days ago requesting I present myself for the position of estate archivist. I've traveled 40 miles in a mail coach that smelled of wet dog and someone's unfortunate cheese. The housekeeper's mouth thinned. His lordship is indisposed. I'm authorized to inform applicants that you've hired someone sight unseen? Tabitha tilted her head. How efficient. May I ask what qualifications this phantom archivist possesses? Because I read Latin, Greek, French, German, and enough Italian to translate Dante. I've catalogued 3 private libraries, including the Duke of Wessex's collection of medieval manuscripts. And I'm here, in person, damp. A door opened somewhere in the depths of the house. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, with an odd rhythm that suggested someone moving carefully. The housekeeper's face went pale. Mrs. Holloway. The voice was male, cultured, and carried the particular weariness of someone who'd recently lost an argument with gravity. Why is there a very wet woman in my entrance hall? My lord, I was just lying to her, apparently. Lord Ravenshire emerged from the corridor, and Tabitha revised her mental image of wealthy reclusive nobleman considerably. He was perhaps 35, dark-haired, and leaning heavily on a walking stick. More notably, he had a spectacular bruise blooming across his left cheekbone, and what appeared to be dried blood at his collar. Miss Grimwood, I presume. You're early. You're bleeding, Tabitha said. An astute observation. He transferred his weight to the stick and offered a slight bow that made him wince. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. I had an unfortunate encounter with my library ladder approximately 2 hours ago. The ladder won. Mrs. Holloway made a strangled sound. My lord, you should be resting. I should be interviewing my archivist. He fixed Tabitha with eyes that were an unusual shade of amber, almost gold in the lamplight. Unless you've been frightened off by my housekeeper's creative interpretation of my instructions. Tabitha glanced at Mrs. Holloway, whose expression had progressed from pale to actively murderous. Interesting. I'm not easily frightened, Lord Ravenshire, though I am increasingly curious about why your staff is attempting to turn away the person you specifically requested. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. An excellent question. Mrs. Holloway? The housekeeper drew herself up. My lord, I merely thought, given your condition, that perhaps a male archivist would be more appropriate. Because women are notoriously incapable of alphabetizing? Tabitha inquired. Or is it the Latin we struggle with? Lord Ravenshire's mouth twitched. Miss Grimwood, would you care to see the library? I'm afraid it's in considerable disarray. The previous archivist left rather suddenly 6 months ago, and I've been... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Indisposed. Indisposed enough to fall off ladders? Among other things. He gestured toward the corridor. Shall we? Tabitha followed him through a series of increasingly dim hallways. The manor was grand but oddly lifeless. No servants visible, no sounds of household activity. Windows shuttered despite the afternoon hour. Lord Ravenshire moved slowly, clearly in pain, but refused assistance. The library, when they reached it, was magnificent and catastrophic in equal measure. 3 stories of books rose to a painted ceiling, connected by a spiral staircase and a network of ladders. Papers covered every surface. Several shelves had collapsed, spilling volumes across the floor in archaeological layers. Good God, Tabitha breathed. Indeed. Lord Ravenshire lowered himself carefully into a chair. The collection spans 4 centuries, My family has been rather obsessive about acquisition and rather negligent about organization. I need someone who can impose order on chaos. The pay is generous, room and board included, and I promise not to bleed on the manuscripts. Tabitha picked her way through the debris to examine the nearest shelf. Medieval theology, Renaissance philosophy, 18th century natural history, all jumbled together without system or sense. Her fingers itched to begin sorting. Why did the previous archivist leave? He found the working conditions unsettling. The disorder, you mean? Among other things. Lord Ravenshire watched her with those odd amber eyes. I should mention that I keep irregular hours. You'll rarely see me during daylight. I have a medical condition that makes sunlight difficult. Photosensitivity? Tabitha pulled down a volume of Aquinas, noting the marginalia in what appeared to be 16th century Italian. My youngest sister has something similar. She wears a wide-brimmed hat and suffers through garden parties. A practical solution. He shifted in his chair, wincing again. Miss Grimwood, I feel I should be direct. This household is unconventional. I live alone apart from Mrs. Holloway, who comes during the day and leaves before sunset. I have few visitors and prefer it that way. If you accept this position, you'll be working in near total isolation. Some would find that intolerable. Tabitha thought of her sister's house, loud, crowded, full of pointed comments about her unmarried state and useless education. Some would find it paradise. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his austere features. When can you start? I already have. She set down the Aquinas and picked up a fallen ledger. This is your acquisition record, I assume? It ends in 1848, that's… She calculated quickly. 15 years of uncatalogued purchases. Closer to 20, actually. The record-keeping became sporadic before it stopped entirely. He rose carefully, using the walking stick for balance. I'll have Mrs. Holloway prepare your room. We can discuss terms over dinner, assuming you don't mind dining at midnight. I don't mind dining at dawn if the library's involved. Tabitha opened the ledger, already making mental notes. Though I do have one question. Yes? Why did your housekeeper really try to turn me away? And please don't insult my intelligence by claiming she was concerned about my gender. Lord Ravenshire was silent for a long moment. Mrs. Holloway is protective. She believes I should remain completely isolated from company. She thinks visitors are dangerous. Dangerous to whom? An excellent question, Miss Grimwood. He moved toward the door, each step clearly painful. I'll let you form your own conclusions. Tabitha watched him leave, noting the way he avoided the shaft of late sunlight coming through a gap in the shutters, the careful control of his movements, the walking stick that seemed more necessity than affectation. She looked down at the ledger in her hands, then at the magnificent chaos surrounding her. Something was distinctly wrong with Lord Ravenshire and his household. Any sensible woman would make polite excuses and catch the next coach home. Tabitha had never been accused of excessive sensibility. She rolled up her sleeves and began sorting books. 3 days passed in a blur of dust and discovery. Tabitha established a system, chronological within subject categories, with separate sections for manuscripts, correspondence, and rare editions. She worked from late afternoon until dawn, matching Lord Ravenshire's nocturnal schedule without comment. He appeared each evening around sunset, reviewed her progress, and occasionally assisted despite his obvious physical limitations. He was, she discovered, wickedly intelligent, and surprisingly funny in a bone-dry way that suggested he hadn't had anyone to talk to in quite some time. He could discuss Aristotelian ethics and penny-dreadful novels with equal enthusiasm. He remembered every book in the collection and could quote passages from memory. He also never ate in her presence, never appeared in daylight, and moved with the careful precision of someone managing constant pain. On the 4th evening, Tabitha found him collapsed at the base of the spiral staircase, unconscious and alarmingly cold to the touch. She didn't scream. She'd helped her sister through 3 difficult childbirths and once set her brother's broken arm, using a medical text as reference. Panic was inefficient. She checked his pulse, slow but steady, and examined the fresh blood seeping through his shirt. The fall had reopened whatever injury he'd sustained before. She got her arms under his shoulders and dragged him to the nearest sofa, grateful for the upper body strength developed through years of moving heavy books. His eyes opened as she was unbuttoning his waistcoat. "Miss Grimwood? Hold still. You're bleeding again." She peeled back his shirt and stopped. The wound beneath was wrong, too clean, too deep, and healing far too quickly even as she watched. The edges were knitting together with visible speed, skin regenerating in a way that human flesh simply didn't. Lord Ravenshire's hand caught her wrist. "I can explain. I certainly hope so." Tabitha met his eyes steadily. "Because that's not a ladder injury, and you're not photosensitive." He released her wrist and sat up slowly. The wound had already closed, leaving only a thin red line. "No, I'm not." "You're one of the blood-cursed." Tabitha kept her voice level. "Vampire is the common term, I believe, though I've only encountered references in folklore texts." "You're taking this remarkably well." "I'm taking it quietly. There's a difference." She sat back on her heels, studying him. "How long?" 247 years. He met her gaze without flinching. "I was turned during the Jacobite Rising. I've been managing ever since." "Managing poorly, based on the evidence." Tabitha gestured at his still bloody shirt. "What actually happened?" "There was a hunter, 3 nights ago. He had a crossbow, and considerably better aim than I anticipated." Lord Ravenshire touched his side gingerly. "I managed to escape, but the bolt was silver-tipped. The wound keeps reopening." "And you didn't think to mention that you were being hunted when you hired me?" "Would you have stayed if I had?" Tabitha considered this. "Probably. I'd have wanted to see the vampire first." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I assume you need blood to heal properly?" His expression shuddered. "I manage." "Manage how? You clearly haven't fed in days. You can barely walk. And now there's a hunter who knows where you live." She crossed her arms. "I'm an archivist, Lord Ravenshire. I deal in facts and systems. Give me the facts." He stared at her for a long moment. "I feed from animals, deer mostly, from the estate grounds. It's sufficient for basic survival, but not for healing major injuries. I haven't taken human blood in over a century." "Why not?" "Because I refuse to be what I was made to be." His voice was quiet but fierce. "I won't hurt people. I won't take what isn't freely given. I'd rather die slowly than become a monster." "That's very noble and remarkably stupid." Tabitha moved to the desk and found paper and pencil. "How much blood would you need to heal completely?" "Miss Grimwood, answer the question." "A pint, perhaps less." He watched her warily. "What are you doing?" "Making a list." She wrote quickly. 1. We need to secure the manor against hunters. That means better locks, warning systems, and probably some creative use of holy water myths. 2. You need proper nutrition, which means either better hunting grounds or— She paused. "An alternative source." "There is no alternative source." "There's me." The silence that followed was profound. Lord Ravenshire rose slowly, his amber eyes wide. "Absolutely not." "Why not? I'm healthy, I'm here, and I'm apparently the only person in this household with any practical sense." Tabitha continued writing. "A pint is survivable. People donate blood for medical purposes all the time. It's not that different." "It's completely different." He crossed to her, moving with sudden fluid grace despite his injury. "Miss Grimwood, Tabitha, you don't understand what you're offering." "I understand you're injured and stubborn and about to pass out again if you don't accept help." She set down the pencil and met his eyes. "I also understand that you've been alone in this house for months, possibly years, slowly starving yourself out of principle. That's not nobility. That's just slow suicide." "Better that than, Then what?" Accepting help? Admitting you need someone? She softened her voice. Lord Ravenshire, I'm not offering out of pity or fascination with the supernatural. I'm offering because you hired me to organize your library, and I can't do that if you're dead. It's purely practical. He laughed, a short, sharp sound. You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. I'm the most practical woman you've ever met. There's a difference. She held out her wrist. Will this work, or do you need a different location? Lord Ravenshire took her hand gently, his fingers cool against her skin. Tabitha, if I do this, if I accept this, you need to understand what it means. Vampire feeding creates a connection. You'll feel what I feel. You'll sense my presence. It's intimate in a way that goes beyond the physical. Will it hurt? No. I can make it pleasant. Then stop arguing and bite me before you collapse again. He drew her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. You're certain? I'm certain you're wasting time. He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and pressed his lips to her wrist. The bite, when it came, was nothing like she'd expected. No pain, just a strange pulling sensation and a warmth that spread up her arm and through her chest. She felt his relief like a physical thing, his hunger giving way to something deeper and more complex. She also felt his desire. Lord Ravenshire pulled back abruptly, his eyes wide. I'm sorry. Don't. Tabitha's voice was steadier than she felt. Don't apologize for that. He was already backing away, pressing a handkerchief to her wrist. I shouldn't have. That was inappropriate. It was honest. She took the handkerchief and applied pressure herself. And mutual, if you must know. He stared at her. Tabitha. The window exploded inward. Tabitha hit the floor on instinct, arms over her head as glass rained down. Lord Ravenshire was already moving, inhumanly fast, positioning himself between her and the window. A man in hunter's gear vaulted through the broken frame, crossbow raised. Stay down, Lord Ravenshire commanded, his voice carrying a weight that made her bones vibrate. The hunter fired. Lord Ravenshire twisted, and the bolt passed through the space where his chest had been a moment before. He caught the hunter's wrist as the man reached for another bolt, and there was a sharp crack. You're trespassing, Lord Ravenshire said quietly. Leave. Not without your head, demon. The hunter spat blood. The Brotherhood knows you're here. We know what you are. We know you've taken a woman. I've employed an archivist, hardly the same thing. Lord Ravenshire's grip tightened. And the Brotherhood has no authority here. This is private property, and you're breaking a dozen laws. Tabitha stood slowly, ignoring Lord Ravenshire's warning glance. She picked up the crossbow the hunter had dropped and examined it with interest. This is well made, expensive. The Brotherhood must have significant funding. The hunter's eyes widened. You're helping him? I'm working for him. Again, not the same thing. She set down the crossbow carefully. Though I'm beginning to think my employment contract should include hazard pay. He's a monster. He's a reclusive nobleman with unusual dietary requirements and excellent taste in books. Tabitha crossed her arms. You, on the other hand, just broke into a private residence and attempted murder. I'm fairly certain the law has opinions about that. Lord Ravenshire's expression was carefully neutral, but she felt his amusement through the connection between them, warm and surprised. Miss Grimwood raises an excellent point. I could have you arrested. The Brotherhood would have you exposed. The Brotherhood would have to prove I'm not simply an eccentric noble with a medical condition. Lord Ravenshire released the hunter's wrist. Go back to your masters. Tell them Lord Ravenshire is under the protection of the law and employs witnesses. Tell them the next hunter who trespasses will face prosecution. The hunter clutched his broken wrist, his face pale. This isn't over. It is for tonight. Lord Ravenshire gestured to the window. Leave the way you came, and take your crossbow. Miss Grimwood is right. It's too expensive to abandon. The hunter fled, scrambling through the broken window with considerably less grace than his entrance. Lord Ravenshire waited until the sound of footsteps faded, then turned to Tabitha. Are you hurt? I'm fine. You're the one who nearly got shot. She examined him critically. Though you're moving better now. The blood helped? Considerably. He touched his side where the wound had been. It's completely healed. Good. Then you can help me board up this window before we both freeze. Tabitha located a broom and began sweeping glass. We should also discuss security measures. That hunter found you too easily. Tabitha. Lord Ravenshire caught her hand, stopping her mid-sweep. You just defended a vampire to a hunter. You could have left. You could have claimed I'd compelled you, that you were an innocent victim. Instead, you argued property law. Well, he was trespassing. That's not the point. Then what is the point? She set down the broom and faced him fully. That I should be frightened? That I should run screaming because you're not human? Lord Ravenshire, I've spent the last 3 days watching you apologize to books when you drop them and argue philosophy with a portrait of your grandmother. You're the least frightening monster I've ever encountered. I could hurt you. So could a mail coach, a bad oyster, or my sister Prudence when she's in a mood. Life is risk. She squeezed his hand. Besides, you won't hurt me. You're too busy hurting yourself. He pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to brush a piece of glass from her hair. You're absolutely mad. I prefer practical. But her heart was racing, and she knew he could hear it. Lord Ravenshire, Nathaniel, if we're going to face hunters together, you should probably use my given name. Nathaniel. She tested the name, liking the shape of it. We need to talk about the Brotherhood. We do. But he didn't move away, and neither did she. The connection between them hummed with possibility. His desire, her curiosity, the strange intimacy of shared blood and shared danger. A polite cough from the doorway shattered the moment. Mrs. Holloway stood in the entrance, her expression thunderous. My lord, I heard glass breaking. She stopped, taking in the scene. The shattered window, the blood-stained handkerchief in Tabitha's hand, the way Lord Ravenshire was standing far too close to his archivist. Mrs. Holloway. Nathaniel stepped back smoothly. We had an intruder, a hunter from the Brotherhood. He's been dealt with. The housekeeper's face went white. They found you. They found me months ago. This is simply the first time they've acted. He moved to the window, examining the damage. We'll need a glazier, discreet one. My lord, you can't stay here if the Brotherhood knows. I'm not leaving. His voice was flat. This is my home. I've run enough. Mrs. Holloway's gaze shifted to Tabitha, and her expression hardened. This is her fault. You were safe until she arrived. I was dying until she arrived. Nathaniel's tone brooked no argument. Slowly, perhaps, but dying nonetheless. Miss Grimwood has given me a reason to fight back. She's given them a hostage. The housekeeper's voice shook. My lord, they'll use her against you. They'll threaten her, hurt her. Then I'll protect her. He glanced at Tabitha. If she'll allow it. I'd prefer we protect each other, Tabitha said. I'm not particularly interested in being a damsel, but Mrs. Holloway raises a valid point. The Brotherhood will escalate. We need a plan. Nathaniel smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression she hadn't seen before. Then it's fortunate I've spent 2 centuries learning how to disappoint hunters. Miss Grimwood, how do you feel about forgery? I'm an archivist. I'm excellent at forgery. Splendid. He turned to his housekeeper. Mrs. Holloway, I need you to contact Dr. Pemberton. Tell him I require a medical consultation, something that will generate official documentation. The housekeeper frowned. What kind of documentation? The kind that proves I'm a living man with a rare blood disorder, not a supernatural creature. Nathaniel began pacing, energy returning to his movements. We'll need witness statements, medical records, perhaps a letter from a bishop confirming my regular church attendance. You haven't attended church in a century, Mrs. Holloway pointed out. Then we'll forge that too. He shot Tabitha a conspiratorial look. The Brotherhood operates in shadows and superstition. We'll defeat them with paperwork and bureaucracy. Tabitha felt something warm unfurl in her chest, not the blood connection, but something deeper and more dangerous. You're going to bore them into submission. I'm going to make it legally and socially impossible for them to act against me without exposing themselves as fanatics. He stopped pacing and faced them both. The Brotherhood thrives on secrecy. They hunt in darkness, kill without witnesses, and rely on the fact that their victims can't defend themselves in court. But I'm not a mindless monster. I'm a peer of the realm with property, documentation, and now, he gestured to Tabitha, a respectable employee who can testify to my character. They'll claim I'm compelled, Tabitha said. Then we'll have Dr. Pemberton examine you and declare you free of any undue influence. Nathaniel's smile widened. We'll fight them with the very system they hide behind. Mrs. Holloway looked between them, her expression conflicted. This is madness. This is survival. Nathaniel's voice softened. I'm tired of hiding, Mrs. Holloway. I'm tired of pretending I don't exist. If the Brotherhood wants to expose me, let them try. I'll expose them right back. The housekeeper was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. I'll contact Dr. Pemberton in the morning. But my lord, if this fails... If this fails, Miss Grimwood and I will improvise. He met Tabitha's eyes. We're rather good at that. Tabitha felt the connection between them pulse with warmth, his gratitude, her determination, and underneath it all, a growing affection that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. We should start with the library records. If we can document your book purchases over the past century, it establishes a pattern of normal scholarly behavior. Normal scholarly behavior that happens exclusively at night? Eccentric scholarly behavior. There's precedent. She was already mentally cataloging the evidence they'd need. We'll need character witnesses beyond Mrs. Holloway. Do you have any friends? I have acquaintances who owe me favors. That'll work. She picked up the broom again. But first, we're boarding up this window. I refuse to organize books in a draft. Nathaniel laughed, a genuine, delighted sound, and took the broom from her hands. You're extraordinary, Tabitha Grimwood. I'm practical, but she smiled as she said it and felt his answering warmth through the bond between them. They worked through the night, boarding windows and planning strategy. Mrs. Holloway departed at dawn with a list of tasks and a grudging acceptance of Tabitha's presence. Nathaniel retreated to his chambers as sunlight threatened, but not before catching Tabitha's hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for fighting, for everything. Thank you for hiring the worst-dressed applicant. She squeezed his fingers. Get some rest. We have a brotherhood to bureaucratically destroy tomorrow. He raised her hand to his lips, a gesture that should have been old-fashioned, but felt intimate and right. Sleep well, Tabitha. She watched him go, touching the place where his lips had pressed, and wondered when exactly she'd fallen in love with a vampire. The answer, she suspected, was somewhere between the Latin and the crossbow. The next 3 weeks were a blur of documentation, testimony, and strategic social maneuvering. Dr. Pemberton, a discreet physician who'd treated Nathaniel's condition for decades, provided medical records describing a rare blood disorder that required nocturnal habits and dietary restrictions. The local vicar, who remembered Nathaniel's generous donations to the Church Restoration Fund, penned a letter praising his character. 3 scholars from London arrived to examine the library and declared it a national treasure requiring preservation. The Brotherhood sent 2 more hunters. Both were met by constables and threatened with prosecution for trespassing and attempted murder. The second hunter made the mistake of claiming divine authority, which resulted in the vicar publicly denouncing him as a heretic. By the end of the month, Lord Ravenshire was no longer a mysterious recluse, but an eccentric nobleman with a fascinating library and a tragic medical condition. The Brotherhood, faced with the choice between exposing themselves as vigilantes or retreating, chose retreat. Tabitha catalogued it all with the same precision she applied to books. On the first night of relative peace, Nathaniel found her in the library, surrounded by sorted volumes and looking triumphant. "It's done," she announced. "Complete chronological catalog, cross-referenced by subject and author. 4 centuries of chaos reduced to perfect order." "You're magnificent." He crossed to her, moving with the fluid grace of someone no longer in constant pain. "The library, I mean. The catalog is magnificent." "Liar." But she smiled, setting down her pen. "How are you feeling?" "Strong, healthy, alive, in a manner of speaking." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her wrist where he'd bitten her. "Thanks to you. Thanks to dear blood and proper nutrition." But her pulse quickened at his touch, and she knew he could feel it through their connection. "Tabitha." His voice was serious now. "I need to tell you something. If this is another confession about your supernatural nature, I'm going to be disappointed. I thought we'd moved past that. It's not about what I am. It's about what I want." He drew her closer, his amber eyes intent on hers. "I want you to stay. Not as my archivist, though you're welcome to continue terrorizing my books, but as my partner, my companion, my—" He hesitated. "My love, if you'll have me." Tabitha's heart did something complicated in her chest. "You're asking me to stay with a vampire?" "I'm asking you to stay with me. The vampire part is simply a detail." "A rather significant detail." "Is it?" He cupped her face gently. "You've seen me at my worst. Injured, hunted, drinking deer blood in the woods at midnight. You've defended me to hunters, forged documents with me, and reorganized my entire library without complaint. If you can tolerate all that, surely you can tolerate a few more centuries of my company." "Centuries?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's rather presumptuous." "I'm an optimist." But his voice was uncertain, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. "Tabitha, I'm offering you immortality, transformation, an eternity of midnight libraries and terrible puns about Dante, but only if you want it, only if you choose it freely." She studied his face, the sharp cheekbones, the amber eyes, the mouth that smiled so rarely but so genuinely when it did. She thought about her sister's house, loud and cramped and full of expectations she'd never meet. She thought about the library, vast and quiet and full of infinite possibility. She thought about the man who'd hired her sight unseen, who'd trusted her with his secrets, who'd made her laugh while boarding up windows against hunters. "I have conditions," she said finally. Relief flooded through their connection. "Name them." "First, I finish cataloging the library, all of it, including the manuscripts you've been hiding in the East Wing." "Agreed." "Second, we establish a proper feeding schedule. No more dramatic collapses. I refuse to spend eternity scraping you off the floor." "Reasonable." "Third," she pulled him down until their foreheads touched. "You stop calling yourself a monster. You're not. You're just a man who happens to be immortal, which is honestly less problematic than my brother-in-law's gambling habit." Nathaniel laughed, the sound warm and free. "I love you, Tabitha Grimwood." "I love you too, Nathaniel Ravenshire." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, tasting possibility and promise. "Though I reserve the right to be irritated when you quote Dante at inappropriate moments." "I make no promises." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt his joy through their connection like sunlight, warm and bright and utterly unexpected. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling. "When?" "When what?" "When do you want to be transformed?" Tabitha considered. "After I finish the catalog, and after we deal with the correspondence collection. It's in even worse shape than the books, and possibly after we redecorate the East Wing, because those curtains are a crime against aesthetics." "So, approximately never?" "Approximately 6 months." She grinned at his expression. "I'm practical, remember? I want to finish my work before I become distracted by immortality." You're going to organize your transformation like a library project, aren't you? Obviously. I'll make a list. She pulled him toward the desk. Speaking of which, we should discuss the practicalities, feeding arrangements, legal documentation, what to tell my sisters. Your sisters? Nathaniel looked alarmed. You want to tell your sisters you're marrying a vampire? I want to tell my sisters I'm marrying a wealthy nobleman with an excellent library. The vampire part can remain classified. She found fresh paper and began writing. Though we'll need to explain the nocturnal schedule. Perhaps we'll claim you're writing a book. I am writing a book. A treatise on medieval philosophy. Perfect. Scholars are expected to keep odd hours. She made a note. We'll need to stage a proper courtship for appearances. Dinner parties, social calls, perhaps a theatrical engagement. Tabitha. Yes? He took the pen from her hand and set it down. The list can wait. But we need to plan. He kissed her, thorough and devastating, until she forgot about lists entirely. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with mischief. We have centuries to plan. Tonight, I'd like to simply enjoy the fact that you're staying. Tabitha felt warmth bloom through their connection, his happiness, her contentment, the strange, perfect rightness of the moment. I suppose the list can wait until tomorrow. Or next week. Don't push your luck. But she was smiling as she said it, and when he pulled her close again, she didn't resist. They stood together in the library, surrounded by centuries of knowledge and possibility, and Tabitha thought that perhaps being practical didn't mean avoiding risk. Perhaps it meant choosing the right risks, the ones that led to midnight libraries and immortal love and a future full of terrible puns about Dante. Nathaniel? She murmured against his shoulder. Yes? Thank you for not being frightened away by my sister's sabotage. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. Thank you for not being frightened away by my tendency to collapse dramatically. We're quite a pair. We are. She pulled back to look at him, memorizing his face in the lamplight. A vampire and an archivist. It sounds like the beginning of a terrible joke. Or a wonderful story. Or that. She kissed him once more, soft and lingering. Though I maintain that my organizational skills are the real miracle here. Undoubtedly. His arms tightened around her. I'll spend the next century telling everyone that I was saved by alphabetization. As you should. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. Not dead, not quite alive, but something in between. Something that had found a way to endure. Nathaniel? Yes, my love. I'm glad they dressed me worst. I'm glad your housekeeper tried to turn me away. I'm glad I was stubborn enough to stay. So am I. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Though I would have chosen you regardless. Worst dress, best dress, no dress at all. That last one would have been scandalous. But memorable. He was grinning now, she could hear it in his voice. Imagine the housekeeper's expression. Tabitha laughed, the sound echoing through the library, and thought that this warmth, this joy, this ridiculous banter in the middle of the night was worth every risk. Worth the hunters and the brotherhood and the shocked disapproval of her sisters. Worth everything. Come on, she said, taking his hand. Show me those manuscripts you've been hiding. If I'm going to spend eternity here, I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. They're in terrible condition, he warned. 14th century alchemy texts, completely disorganized. Perfect. She pulled him toward the east wing, her eyes bright with anticipation. I love a challenge. And as they disappeared into the depths of the library, surrounded by books and possibility, and the promise of infinite tomorrows, Tabitha Grimwood thought that perhaps being overlooked, underestimated, and dressed in the worst possible gown had been the best thing that ever happened to her. After all, it had led her here, to midnight and magic and a love that would outlast centuries. And really, what more could a practical woman ask for?